Hey, Misfit. Before we get into the regularly scheduled program, I wanted to give you a friendly reminder that my upcoming virtual workshop, Dating with Confidence for Quiet, Quirky Women, is just around the corner. It will be held via Zoom on August 22nd, 2025 at 6 p.m. Central Time. If you are a quiet, quirky single lady who is ready to start dating, but you don't really know where to start, you only have a few days to get your ticket and give your dating life the jump start that it needs. In just a 1 hour and 30-minute workshop of focused interaction and instruction, along with other single introverted women who share your experiences, you learn the basics of dating: how to get a man's attention, how to tell if he's genuinely interested in you, how to flirt and show your interest in him without having to be someone you're not, and more importantly, how to set boundaries and have standards for the men that you talk to. Because I don't care what anyone says, being a quiet, quirky late bloomer does not mean that you don't deserve basic respect from the men that you let into your life. You're not just getting instruction from me, someone who is a late bloomer myself and who had to learn a thing or two when I jumped headfirst into the world of dating very unprepared. You will be able to interact live with me and other women just like you from all different walks of life. Again, the workshop is August 22nd, 2025, 6 p.m. Central Time, which is less than 7 days away if you're listening to this before August 22nd. You can find the link to register in the description of this episode or go directly to theintrovertedmisfit.com/quirky dating. Now, back to the regularly scheduled program. Enjoy! Hello to all of you misfits who are tuning into this episode of the Introverted Misfit podcast. Do you ever hang out with a certain group of people and you immediately feel like a fish out of water? Or maybe like a zebra trying to blend in with a bunch of horses? If you happen to be one of my Spectrum listeners, you're probably thinking, yeah, pretty much describes my entire life. Even if you're not on the spectrum, whatever it is that makes you a misfit, a self described misfit, has probably contributed to this feeling of being a social outcast. And what do misfits do when they feel outcasted? They try to cope. They either choose a path of solitude and social seclusion because that feels safer than being rejected, or they try their very best to fit in, even when they are not welcome. Now, disclaimer: I would be lying if I told you that you'll never have to be among people who are different than you and who you don't particularly like, especially if your low support needs autistic like me, because you and I both know that masking is a form of survival. When you're at work, whether you're on a committee of some sort, or whether you're just in some environment in which you're expected to work with others. That's just life. But what about all of those other situations you don't necessarily have to be in, but you still try to force yourself into? When you choose that path, you often find yourself trying to contort yourself like a pretzel to make people like you. You try to mimic their mannerisms, their humor, their interests, maybe their personality. But if you think about it, what are you really gaining from that? I mean, sure, you get the temporary feeling of being liked in that moment, but what about the real you deep down that's feeling neglected and ignored and shamed? The real you that has to go hide in a corner when you're around certain people because you don't want them to think you're weird or too uptight or too boring. The dry humor, or whatever unique type of humor you find funny that they don't think is funny at all. The introverted, quiet you that's too boring, quote unquote boring, for their taste. That you starts to feel broken and unlovable. Kind of like if you take your mask off, even for a little, maybe accidentally or just to breathe a little, no one will like you anymore. You're just like that zebra that tried to paint over its stripes with black paint, but then a little bit of rain starts to fall, and before you know it, uh-oh, your stripes are showing. And you know what? Maybe it wouldn't be such a big deal if they didn't mind your stripes showing, if they understood that you're just a little different. But they do mind. At least the kind of people that you're trying to fit in with do mind. And that's the problem. Story of my life. For a lot of my younger years, I just wanted someone to accept me, despite my little quirks, flaws, and my efforts to hide and mask them. But I just couldn't say the right thing or be the right way. And even when I did try, it still wasn't quite right. Now, to be completely honest, my story is not completely filled with woe and loneliness, although much of it is regarding my social life and friends. I did manage to make a couple of friends who carried me through middle school, and then a couple more in high school who were pretty wonderful. Actually, they were very gracious to see that I was lonely and didn't have friends and kind of adopt me into their little group. But those friendships ended after graduation because you see, autism and other neurological disorders don't just make it hard to start relationships, they make it hard to maintain them long term, too. Those friends that I happened to make only blossomed because we shared a band class together. We were all clarinet players. After that 1 hour class was over, it was right back to being a zebra among the horses again. I ended my 5 years of college with virtually no friends, a few acquaintances that I was eventually able to rekindle after college, which has been really great. But during my actual college years, no relationships that were being consistently nurtured like my other peers' types of friendships and relationships. Because of my autistic traits and social difficulties that they caused, I've always felt the need to change myself and change my behavior so that people will want to be around me. But the downside of that was me trying to make people who didn't like me somehow want to be around me. And thinking back on those times, I was never really successful, not for very long anyway. I could never keep the mask up for as long as they needed me to keep it up. I would eventually say the wrong thing, wear the wrong clothes, give the wrong look, not react in the way they wanted me to, and the jig was up. I was just that weird kid who couldn't hang. I remember throughout my middle school years, I would make various attempts to blend in with the popular kids in my school, mainly for two reasons. Firstly, I was just around them a lot since we were all in the same advanced discovery classes. And secondly, because I didn't really understand things like social hierarchies and social groups. I just tried to talk to anyone, no matter who they were. The popular kids, the hood kids, the Asian kids, the rich kids, the poor kids. It didn't matter. I just didn't have that filter that tells you who you should, quote unquote, should and shouldn't associate with. Or maybe associate with is not the right word. Who you should and who you would be welcomed among and who you wouldn't really be welcomed. Well, there was this one particular time that I think will forever be etched in my memory just from how little t traumatic it was to me. When I tried to join the popular kids conversation this one time. So we were all standing in the line in the lunch line of the cafeteria, and I tried to join their conversation 3 different times in 3 different ways. And after the last unsuccessful attempt, one of the girls just flat out said, "You're being really weird. We don't want to talk to you." She definitely didn't sugarcoat her thoughts, I'll give her that. But that describes many of my experiences, even if they weren't as cut and dry like she decided to be. And even in my band classes with the other fellow weird kids, because as I would learn, even among the weirdos, there are social hierarchies and groups that form. You have the popular band kids, the really weird band kids, like the really, really weird ones, the dark humor ones, the ones who excel at their instruments and so they think they're better than everyone, the whole lot. It's like a mini social group in itself. And I just couldn't get it right with most of them, except for the two clarinet players who, like I said in the beginning, graciously adopted me into their friend circle whenever they could. My approach was wrong. My behavior during the hangout was wrong. It was just all wrong. You know, when I think back on some of the cringy things that I said and the embarrassment I felt when they laughed or rolled their eyes, I just want to hide under the covers and never come out. I'm sure you can probably relate if you've ever tried to fit in where you aren't welcome. If you are one of those misfits who tries to fit in with what I call the wrong crowd, I have a suggestion that you might want to consider. The problem is not that you're quirky or awkward or on the spectrum. I mean, I'm not saying those qualities don't pose issues, but I'm saying that that's a different problem than the one that I'm talking about. The real problem is that you don't really accept yourself for who you are. And because you don't accept yourself, you constantly try to find validation among people who just don't understand you and don't want to understand you. So it doesn't matter how hard you try to be nice and act like them, how much you try to mask and copy their behavior, they are simply not your people. You're going to lose yourself trying to hang out with people like that. Here's what I mean, in case that wasn't clear enough. I may be on the autism spectrum, right? But apart from that disorder, I have a set of morals that I believe and try to follow. I have my own interests, like reading, writing, gardening, going on long walks. And I have my own set of boundaries and standards for the people I call friends and the men I decide to date. And while I do mask to improve my communication and my relational skills, I am simply not willing to ignore and change those core parts of me that I just listed off just to fit in. Does that make sense? Let me know in the comments if this concept makes sense to you. So, what I'm saying is when you can accept yourself, including your strengths, weaknesses, flaws, quirks, and be okay with the things about you that may require some management and improvement, that that deep need that you have to be liked by the wrong crowd of people is going to go away, or at least it will get better. It won't be as glaring. Do you know what I do now when people make it clear to me that they don't want to talk to me? It may sting a little bit in the moment, but for the most part, I move on and I find someone else who wants to talk to me. You know what my past self would have done? Spent the next 3 weeks obsessing over the fact that I got rejected, and then ruminate about all the other times in the past where I felt rejected and embarrassed. All of that probably sounds really familiar if you are a fellow misfit who struggles with something called rejection sensitive dysphoria, or RSD. And that's what it's called when your brain overreacts to perceived or actual rejection. Now, I'm mostly on the other side of that need for validation and those feelings of that sensitivity to rejection. And now that I am on the other side, I can't tell you how much more free I feel. Now that I'm not fixated on making every single person like me and want to be my friend. It has transformed my friendships, my client relationships in my business, because I don't back away from challenging those unhealthy beliefs and thoughts, my dating life. Speaking of which, don't forget to sign up for my workshop, Dating with Confidence for Quiet, Quirky Women, before August 22nd, if you have not already. But it has impacted every aspect of my life, truthfully. It changes how I walk into rooms because I'm no longer worried about fitting in with every single person. I'm just focused on being my most confident self, putting my best foot forward, and accepting the relationships that are meant for me and not worrying so much about the ones that are not meant for me. And I think it's about time for you to start being yourself. Now, to me, being yourself doesn't mean that you can't improve in some areas of your life and communication, but it does mean that you stop trying to contort every part of yourself and who you really are just to fit in. It's not about unmasking completely, because, like I said, masking is a survival technique for those of us who are able to do it. But to me, masking is not about erasing who you are and your opinions and what you believe. Being yourself and being comfortable with yourself allows you to find a community among people who give you grace when you may slip up and make a mistake, as we all do, even non-autistic people. And it means finding people who understand those things about you that sometimes have to be explained and justified. The quirks, the autistic traits, the social burnout, the involuntary stimming, all of that. But here's something else for you to consider. How on earth are you going to find your people if you're too afraid to talk to them? At this point in the episode, I'm really only talking to those of you misfits who struggle with your overall confidence, but specifically your social confidence. So, shyness, social anxiety, feeling like you'll never feel comfortable talking to people and socializing. If you're too afraid to look at people, introduce yourself, and have a conversation with them, you'll never find a community who accepts you. I mean, literally, if you don't put yourself out there, they're not going to find you and you're not going to find them. And that is something that I want to help you change if you are in a place to change that. My one-on-one coaching services are specifically for shy and awkward, whether you're autistic or not, introverts who are ready to improve their social skills and their confidence so that they can start to build healthy, manageable social lives that work with their needs. It's not about pretending to be someone you're not. It's not about learning how to socialize like an extrovert. It's about using your communication strengths to make relationships that matter. As you've probably heard me say many times before on this podcast, I believe in the importance of a community. And being an introverted person does not mean that you need to be alone all of the time. You still need friends. Or even if you don't need friends, you need some sort of social network, some sort of uh, manageable manageable social life where you're talking to people and feeding that emotional connection need that all of us have. So even if you don't hang out with them or talk to them every week or maybe even every month because you need some solo time to recharge, you still need connection. Everybody needs connection. So if that's something that you struggle with, building up your social skills and your social confidence is the first step to starting to build those relationships and starting to build those social networks for yourself. And that is exactly what my services will help you do, along with building your courage to actually use those skills in the real world. So check the description of this episode for the link to book your free connection call with me today, or you can go directly to theintrovertedmisfit.com/coaching, and you can read all about my program for shy and awkward introverts called Communicate with Quiet Confidence. That's all for today's episode. As always, if you enjoyed this talk, please don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button, leave a review and a comment, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or one of the other um, audio only platforms like Spotify Podcast or Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast from. And share this podcast with a friend. Thanks for listening and have a great day.